Hello and welcome to our channel. In a previous video, we discussed the concept of a theory of change. Of course, the theory of change is a favorite of public health programmers, of public health evaluators. But very few of us acknowledge that a theory of change has certain caveats. Now, this video is actually experiential. It builds on our experience of evaluating different complex public health interventions. I shall be sharing some of it. A typical theory of change has impact linked to outcomes, to output, to processes, to input. Along with it, we also mentioned about the context and the assumptions. Any good evaluator, if asked to evaluate a program, would definitely want to monitor and evaluate against certain indicators which measure each of these. So there have to be some indicators for measuring the inputs, the processes, the outputs, outcome, impact, and also certain data points to capture the context and the assumptions, so that at the end of it we could tell a story that whatever impact has happened is because of these interventions, and of course any additional or parallel changes in the context could be described and the results or interpretations done in light of those changes in the assumptions or context. Does this look a bit oversimplistic? Of course it does. Real life change is not as linear. What really happens is, imagine we are entering a community and we are doing an intervention. Immediately the community starts responding. Even before our intervention or in full-on implementation, the community starts showing some response or maybe a reaction to the intervention that you're doing. That means there will be feedback loops operating, and based on these loops, our inputs will also start responding. That means the theory of change that we had initially designed keeps changing. So there's a lot of programmatic evolution that happens as we start implementing an intervention. That way, a theory of change has to be then a living theory. But that is a bit unlikely. Usually, theory of changes are designed prospectively if the program is well planned. Or at times, if the program is not as well planned, some people may decide to design a theory of change retrospectively. Both have their limitations. In this prospective design, as I said, if you don't update or you don't adapt, then it is likely that you'll miss out on these feedback loops. If you're doing it absolutely retrospectively, that means you do not have a theory of change. At the end of the program, you decide to design a theory of change and then identify indicators for evaluation, then the chances are that you would end up confirming whatever theory you have designed. That means there could be a confirmation bias that could happen. The third is, we have a very oversimplified, patchy theory of change. That means we fail to capture context and assumptions. This is very common. The meaning or the weight or the value that a theory of change has differs from different program people to different program people. So organizations to organizations, experts to experts, these definitions could carry some variations. And that's why the theory of change many times fails to capture the real changes that would happen within a programmatic context. That said, many times our philosophical approaches or our mindsets also do not fit into the picture. For example, if I'm into a realistic evaluation, then I'd like to see how the context operates through different mechanisms to achieve different outcomes. The mechanisms cannot be captured adequately. The response mechanisms, the community responses, or the stakeholder responses, and the pathways many times are not well captured in theory of change. If I'm a systems researcher, if I'm using systems thinking approaches and all, then I'd like to see what feedback loops operated, how my system learned, so the learning process, and how the system adapted. If I'm an implementation science researcher, then I would want more description of the context, how the context has responded, and I'd like to comment on the sustainability of the program. If the theory of change upfront does not acknowledge these approaches, then it is likely to be an oversimplified sequence of events which provides only partial information about a program's causal loops, a partial information about why things changed and how. One of the ways of overcoming these limitations is to not just rely exclusively on quantitative data, but to build multiple mechanisms of data points, data capture here. One approach could be, we do a baseline, we do a midterm, and we do an endline. Now this midterm will provide us opportunities to do midterm course corrections and also document how things have changed initially and in the later part of the program. The other aspect could be to have mixed methods approaches at every stage. So it's not just the quantitative data that is whether the data points are moving or not, at least the qualitative changes could be captured there and explored. The third way could be to include frameworks like CIFR, REAIM. By using these kind of comprehensive frameworks, we ensure that we have all the variables accounted for. The fourth approach could be to have a very robust monitoring and tracking system also built into the program. So evaluation does not exclusively rely on what we find at different time points, but a continuous stitching together of whatever changes happen in between. These are certain approaches that we could use to strengthen our evaluation processes, to fill up for the gaps that a theory of change could show up. Nevertheless, it's a very powerful tool, but it requires expertise to drive. Thank you for being with us. I hope this helps us in acknowledging theory of change with its limitations and of course advantages. Thank you.